A family is begging for justice after the man suspected of killing a young mother allegedly took off with their children to another country. Now that case has jumped international borders. And what steps are police taking to make sure Sheylla Gutierrez's alleged killer doesn't get away? I'm going to be sitting down with a California police officer who can offer unique insight into this case. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. The search for a missing mother of three in Southern California has come to a tragic end. 33-year-old mother of three, Sheylla Gutierrez, sometimes known as Sheylla Cabrera, was found dead in the Angeles National Forest days after friends reported her missing. But this is a case that is far from over. Why? Because authorities are trying to track down their prime suspect, her husband, 36-year-old Jossimar Cabrera. Now, Sheylla Cabrera and their three sons had emigrated to the United States in 2023 from Peru. This is according to Sheylla's family, hoping for a fresh start, a better life than they had in their home country. But that dream apparently turned into a nightmare, as Sheylla's loved ones allege that domestic violence in the couple's relationship continued in the United States. Authorities believe that Sheylla died on August 10th at an apartment in Lancaster. She was reported missing 2 days later, and police immediately noticed several suspicious and disturbing pieces of information. What am I talking about? August 13th. Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies said they found footage from a nearby Ring camera that apparently showed Cabrera dragging something heavy in a large piece of cloth away from the apartment complex. That video was recorded on August 10th at around 4 a.m., according to NBC4 Los Angeles. Obviously, that raised a lot of red flags. Then, when authorities discovered that not only Cabrera was nowhere to be found, but that his three sons were also missing, alarm bells went off. The children were logged into the missing persons system at that point. This is according to the Los Angeles Times. Saturday, August 16th, search and rescue teams, they find Sheylla's body wrapped up in material very similar to what we saw on that Ring camera footage, apparently dumped over the side of an embankment. According to reporting from the LA Times, the medical examiner hasn't determined a cause of death yet, but we can get an idea of what happened based on the charge that was filed against Cabrera in a new extradition warrant, one count of murder with allegations that he used a knife as a deadly weapon. Now, Sheylla's family has revealed more details about what was apparently happening behind the scenes that may have motivated this alleged brutal attack, because according to Sheylla's mom, there had been reports of domestic violence in this house. Now, she spoke with outlet Latina Noticias, saying, "She told me that Jossimar Cabrera Cornejo hit her, mistreated her, and even slapped my youngest grandchild, who is 3 years old. I called my daughter, but she didn't answer. I spoke to Jossimar on Sunday, and he told me that immigration had taken my daughter." Yeah, that's right. So Cabrera reportedly told Helga that her daughter had gone to an immigration appointment and had been detained. But Helga was suspicious, not only because the immigration office isn't open on Sundays, but because of a conversation that she'd had with Sheylla just 1 day before. Helga told the same outlet, "She told me that he abused them, hit them. I found out that he had slapped the baby when he was younger. She told me, 'Mom, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to file a complaint today, Saturday.'" Now, according to Helga, Cabrera was in the room when they were talking and got angry. Quote, "He didn't say anything, but looked at her with a fierce expression. Later, I heard him say, 'Don't file a complaint, you'll hurt me.'" Now, Helga again told this outlet that she spoke with Sheylla one more time on a video call, but never saw her alive again. And according to Sheylla's sister, per reporting from ABC7, Cabrera kept changing his story about what happened to his wife. After saying ICE detained her, he then said she left with another man. Then in a third story, apparently said she'd had some kind of accident. It's believed that Cabrera took off with the three children to Peru. And video from the airport in Lima, Peru had spread like wildfire on social media, and it shows someone following after a man believed to be Cabrera, who's being escorted outside by Lima police. According to outlet Univision, Cabrera was arrested on August 16th, the same day that Sheylla's body would be found, but apparently was released because there wasn't yet a warrant for his extradition. According to the LA County Sheriff's Department, the three children were found safe. They were taken into protective custody before being released to Sheylla's family in Peru. So as we're talking the law here, let me call out real quick an expert on the law, the legal sponsor who helped us make this episode happen, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. This is a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. You know why they have so many? Because they win a lot. They have recovered, listen to this, over $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. In fact, in the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. Out in Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. Another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. And even if you think your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not just start a claim and fight for what you deserve? That's the point. Morgan & Morgan makes it so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code on screen. And then you go to Friday, August 22nd. The LA County District Attorney's Office announced that it had filed an extradition arrest warrant for Cabrera for murder. District Attorney Nathan J. Hochman said in a statement, "The allegations against this man are horrific, and we will do everything possible to bring him back under our jurisdiction to be held accountable. Domestic violence creates chaos in our communities and shatters families. My office is committed to bringing stability back into the lives of those who have been victimized." According to the DA, Cabrera could face 26 years to life in prison if convicted. Okay, so I want to talk about this further, and I want to bring back on someone here on Sidebar who is an excellent voice when it comes to these kinds of investigations. We're joined by Kyle Shoberg, who is a California police sergeant and co-instructor of the Patrol Survival Tactics Seminar and host of the Shots Fired Show podcast. Kyle, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time. You know, one of the things that we talk about a lot when you come on is what happens in a domestic violence situation, in a domestic relationship. And when a person decides to leave their partner, that can sometimes, right, be the highest risk of violence and someone being a target of violence. I mean, how common is it in your experience of seeing a domestic violence situation or a domestic situation turning deadly?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me, Jesse. It is very common, unfortunately, and that's why there's so many programs and advocate programs out there to help victims get out of domestic violence situations. They are one of the most volatile calls and situations that we deal with in law enforcement. And so you're talking about people's emotions getting brought into this. And so that's why we unfortunately see cases like this happen quite frequently.
What would you tell someone who's looking to escape a situation like this? And what is the role of police? How much can they actually do?
Well, first, I would say if you're a victim of domestic violence, go out and speak to somebody that you can confide with. And if it rises to the level of, someone's placing their hands on you, you need to contact police and get the ball rolling for that. I mean, the laws around domestic violence are very strict. Most of the time in most states, there are always going to be a mandated arrest. Now, if you do go that route, obviously we as in law enforcement encourage victims to seek out restraining orders and do whatever we can do to help them get away from their abuser. Now, when you talk about domestic violence, it's not always physical. A lot of times you're dealing with emotional domestic violence. And so that too can be very traumatizing for victims. And most of the times in my career, 19 years in law enforcement, when you do talk to victims of domestic violence, a lot of the times this has been going on for a long period of time, and they're just too afraid to speak out or say anything to anybody.
It's very true. Unfortunately, that's very true. I want to talk a little bit more about this investigation per se. So you have something that started as a missing persons report. Then the homicide team was called in when foul play was suspected. Let's stop right there. What are investigators on the lookout when they're determining the direction of a case, how it's going to go? Because again, I can't say that's surprising. Sometimes when you have a missing persons case, it can then turn into a homicide investigation. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think it depends on what the missing persons case is. In this particular case, you have a mom of 3 children who's married to this guy. She's all of a sudden vanished. Clearly, that's not normal. And I think when you receive a report like that, the investigators are going to dive really deep into that and figure out what happened to her. Has she disappeared before? Is this something that's typical? And if the answer is no, then something potentially bad has potentially happened to her. And so I think in this case, the investigators dove into this, started reviewing video surveillance tapes, and unfortunately, you see what you see in the video of the husband dragging this sheet with clearly something large wrapped up in it through the apartment complex. And in the law enforcement world, that's what we call a clue. And that is when you see that, nothing good is going to come from that. And so I think once they saw that from there, it's okay. Now they need to try to figure out where exactly is she, and then where's the husband.
One of the complicating factors of this is the Angeles National Forest. It is huge, right? It's more than 700,000 acres. You have multiple spots that are designated as wilderness areas. How do you even know where to start a search in an area like that, by the way?
Yeah, I figured you're going to ask me that. And I think what it boils down to, and what most people don't understand, is how evolved technology is in law enforcement. I mean, it's very easy to figure out, okay, we now have a timestamp of when he drug her body out to more than likely his vehicle, plugging his vehicle into license plate readers. There's cameras everywhere in cities nowadays, entrances and exits of parks, public places, and it's not difficult to track somebody's movement utilizing technology. And so if I had to guess, I would say they did that. They tracked him all the way to this national park, wherever he entered this park, and started their search from there, and using probably dogs that trained to sniff for cadavers, even humans that are still alive, massive search teams that are set up strategically. So if I were a betting man, I would guess that that's what led them there.
Is it put a danger on law enforcement searching certain areas? I mean, I always wonder if that's a consideration of killers or suspected killers about placing a body in a place where it would be tough for law enforcement to search.
Yeah, I mean, those are always, things that could come up. I think hazardous situations, but we have so many tools and resources that we can use as law enforcement to either go track somebody down or retrieve a body if it was in a hazardous area.
There's another complicating factor too. You got a suspect fleeing to another country. When that happens, what do you do? Does that throw just a huge wrench into an investigation? Is it a stumbling block? How difficult is that? Because there's one thing trying to track somebody in the United States, in a state, trying to see if they went across state lines. Going to another country, I wonder how complicated that is.
Yeah, it can be very complicated depending on what country it is. Here, he's fled to Peru in South America, and so I don't know that it would be necessarily a roadblock. Is it a lot of extra work? Yes, it is. You have to start securing warrants to be able to send federal agents into Peru, have Peru detain this individual, and then be able to extradite him back to the United States. And so it sounds like that process has already been worked on or dealt with in this particular case. But in reading this article, it says they asked police in Peru to detain him, and they would not do it because there was no warrant. It's just going to require a lot of extra steps.
Just to put a finer point on that, if you look at the timeline here, so Sheylla is believed to have died on August 10th. Friends reported her missing on August 12th. August 13th, deputies review that very creepy surveillance video. They find Sheylla's body on August 16th, and at this point, Cabrera is reportedly arriving in Peru with his children. What exactly do authorities need? What evidence do they need to file an arrest or extradition warrant? Do they have to always have a body? I mean, do you know what the complicating factors could be in order to get someone back?
Yeah, so a lot of times during a homicide investigation, investigators would actually, it boils down to the district attorney's office, would like that body to be able to prove this to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that that person is no longer alive, right? So there have been cases where people do want to disappear on their own and not be found. So they have to prove that that's not what's happened here. And so regarding that would be a circumstantial case, right? You would have to have enough evidence to show that you believe this person is no longer alive. In this case, they have a body. And so all they need to prove is he is tied to this homicide. That is very damaging video evidence against him. And then days after her death, he's fleeing to Peru with his kids. And so that's enough to be able to prove. I'm sure they have an abundance of evidence they found in the house and in talking with family members. It's a long list of things that they would need.
Can we talk about that for a second? So obviously from a legal point of view, me being the attorney, I'm looking at this and saying they have more than enough to go forward with, charges and a trial. Look, even though innocent until proven guilty, I have to tell you, how many times have we talked about cases or we've seen cases where it's like, is there no recognition that whether you Google something, right, or you get caught on surveillance tape, like the idea is, do you not think about that? I mean, is this the idea of it's a panic situation and they're not thinking clearly, but the amount of evidence that is potentially left behind for prosecutors to use against a suspect here, what could be an innocent explanation for that video? I'm struggling to come up with one. You know, I will tell you, I've seen cases before where somebody will say, I didn't kill this person. I either found them dead, they overdosed, there was a fight, it was self-defense. I did clean up the body. I did try to get rid of evidence. You can convict me of that, but I didn't actually murder that person. You know, aside from that, it just, to me, from an investigative point of view, are you ever surprised how much digital evidence is left behind of a crime?
Oh, all the time. I mean, most of the crimes we investigate, yeah, you look back and you just think, really? I mean, in today's day and age, with your cell phone alone, I mean, there's so much digital evidence in just your phone. And so now you're talking about security footage or all the cameras and technology that's out there. You can't explain that. And I think in a case like this, I would venture to believe that this was a panic situation for him, maybe a heat of the moment crime, and he has to get rid of this body. And clearly he is not even thinking about leaving that digital footprint because he's on camera dragging her body clear as day. I'm sure he knows those cameras are there. So I'm sure that's why he took his quick trip to Peru.
What do you make of Cabrera's alleged multiple stories about what happened to Sheylla? If a suspect lies multiple times, how do investigators know when they're actually being honest about something?
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, in today's world, when you're investigating, let's say a homicide, right? Necessarily, we don't want the perpetrator or the suspect to even tell us the truth, right? We want to know if they're a truth teller or a liar. And so when you're sitting somebody down and you're interviewing them, you want them to just share their story. Now, you already know, based on the evidence that you've collected, what the story more than likely is. And so when you sit somebody down, you ask them what happened, they're going to spew their guts out if they decide to talk. And based on what they say, you can circle back and say, okay, well, what about this? Based on this video footage that we have of you. Now, that person's either going to go down the rabbit hole of lying again or telling the truth. And so when you go to court, it's easy to prove that, hey, look, this person's lying. Why are they lying? Here's the evidence to show that that's clearly not what happened. And so doesn't necessarily come down to we need somebody to confess to a crime like that. We just need to be able to show, are you telling the truth or are you lying?
By the way, Kyle, before we got on, you had mentioned something to me about there's something for people, aside from how horrible this case is, there's something important for people to remember about it, something to take away from it. What is that?
I look at this case and my biggest takeaway is if you have a family member or a friend who you have not seen or been in contact with for a period of time that's out of the ordinary, you need to report that person missing immediately. Don't wait 24, 48 hours, whatever you see in the movies that tells you that that's how long you have to wait. Okay? You can report somebody missing immediately, and law enforcement are mandated to take that report. And they are required to start looking into it for every missing person's case. So my best advice is just that. If something's not right, report it to the police immediately.
And I will say this, if you find yourself in a dangerous situation at home, we want to make sure that you know that there are resources out there that can help you. You can call the National Domestic Violence Line for free, confidential, at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233, and it's available 24 hours in English and Spanish. Kyle Shoberg, thank you so much for taking the time. It was good seeing you.
Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate you guys.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.